Business Takeout presents
The Cocktale Hour with L.A. Wade.
What's up, everybody? It's your girl. This is L.A. Wade from Cocktails with L.A., and we are in the Cocktale Hour, where I like to have sobering yet intimate conversations with really amazing people in the arts, culture, sports, and entertainment industry. And before we get started, and I introduce this icon next to me.
Icon.
Yes, icon.
Okay.
Humility is not needed here.
All right.
I want to give a shout out to Business Takeout, who presents the Cocktale Hour. They are a not-for-profit organization that really promotes and inspires Black wealth and Black entrepreneurship. So thank you to Business Takeout. And now, like I said, I would like to introduce to you DJ and broadcaster Paul Mastermind Pahar. How are you today, Paul?
I am good. Thank you for having me. It's dope. I love it.
Yeah, I feel like I shouldn't call you Paul. Even though I know it's your name, you've always been Mastermind.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I'm good with either. There's people there's funny, like, because I've been reposting some of the stories and stuff that were showing that we were doing this today. And there were people that hit me. They're like, they've never seen my government name before. They didn't even know I had a first name. All these, funny little anecdotes and stuff. So I'm good with, however, like, you can call me Paul, you can call me Mastermind. Either way it works. I'm actually good with Paul.
You're good with Paul. I mean, I know somebody who calls you P and has called you P for as long as I've known you.
Yeah. A lot of people call me that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't remember exactly the day or how I met you, but I know it was because of the woman you spend your life with, which means that I don't know how long. When did you meet her?
We met in May of 1991. Really funny story, actually. Is that what we're doing here? We're sharing these kind of things? Okay.
We're telling stories here.
Yeah. So it was LL Cool J at Massey Hall in Toronto. And I was actually with another girl at the time. So I didn't know Tanya at all, right?
What?
And yeah, no, we didn't know each other.
I thought she was the only woman you've ever known and loved.
Oh, yeah. No, that's a fact. But there's a bit of an anecdote before it. So ironically, me and this other girl, we got into a big fight earlier in the day. And so I told her I wasn't bringing her with me anymore. And she had already come to my house, and I told her, bounce. It was one of those we were teenagers, obviously. I might have been 17 or 18. I don't remember. Teenage dumb shit. And, I told her bounce. And as we were leaving, so as my friends came for us to go to this concert, I saw that she was still in and this was like probably an hour or so later, she was still in my neighborhood. She didn't, I guess she didn't know how to get home or whatever. I don't know why. But as we were leaving, I was like, yo, she's still here. And I obviously I'm a softie at heart, so it doesn't matter how mad I am. I'm not going to leave you stranded like that. So I picked her back up. I said, all right, just come. Went to this concert. But I was still mad and kind of bitter about whatever we were fighting about, which I can't even tell you right now. I don't even remember. So we get to the concert. During the show, Tanya and her friend were, a handful of rows ahead of us. And they were wilding out, having a great time. LL was her favorite artist, and she was there, and they were having a good time. And at some point during the night, she caught my eye just because of how much fun they were having. And I was with my friend. I was like, yo, what do you think of her over there? And he's like, yo, man, shut up. You have your girl here, blah, blah, blah. And we're like, all right, cool. So the funny part is we never saw each other. We never talked to each other, nothing. At the end of the concert, when everybody's leaving,
right,
we're walking up the stairs to, go to the exits or however, to back up to, to disperse. And there's somebody on my shoulders behind me like this, like as we're going through this crowd. And I turn around and it was Tanya.
I never knew the story.
Yeah, it was Tanya. I was like, what is going on right now? And literally, and my girlfriend was walking in front of me. So like basically my hands are around my girlfriend and Tanya's hands are on my shoulder. And we get up to the main area, and her and her friend go one way and we go the other way. And that was the end of it. However, I thought about this girl all night, right? Like it was crazy. And I probably thought about her for the whole week. A week later, it was long weekend Spectrum, which was this all ages club in Toronto. And on long weekends back in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s, they would have an all ages event on the Sunday night or whatever.
I remember that. Yeah, I remember.
So we go to this long weekend in May. It's, May 2-4 weekend, obviously. So it was the week earlier was the LL concert. Now it's a week later at this party at Spectrum. So I'm in the club with all our plates packed. We're doing the regular clubbing thing. And at some point during the night, I hear, "I saw you at LL Cool J." And it was Tanya and another friend or whatever. And I looked at her. And again, this is a girl that I thought about for the better part of the week, right? Exactly. And I was like, what the hell? I was like, and when I went to go talk to her, a massive fight broke out, literally right in front of us. Her friend grabs her and runs that way. My guy grabs me and we go the other way because we just want to get out of that area. I spent the whole rest of the night trying to find her. And if you've ever been to a packed club, it's like finding a needle in a haystack, right? It doesn't matter how hard you try. And you don't know if she bounced, you don't know anything. So as luck would have it, near the end of the night, I found her. And I'm shy. I'm not a good conversationalist.
You were quiet.
Yeah, I'm not a good conversationalist. I'm definitely not a playboy by any stretch of the imagination. Like I'm not this, I'm not good at talking to girls or chopping girls or anything like that. So it took a lot of courage for me to go find her again and try to have some conversation with her. And I don't remember what we did, but eventually I gave her my number. She wouldn't give me her number. Actually, it was funny. I had a business I was producing at the time, and the production house I was with gave me business cards. So I gave her my business card with my handwritten number on the back or whatever. And, she was like, yeah, I'll call you. And she never did. I was pissed. She didn't call me for a week.
Oh, wow.
And the whole week I was tight, man. I was like, yo, how do you put your hands on my shoulders and then call me out in the club and play hard to get that hard, right? So she finally called me and, we talked and she, I got an idea what part of the area she was in Saga, nowhere near where we were. I live in Toronto at the time. And, we talked and blah, blah, blah. And she told me where she worked, which was Square One. I had been to Mississauga maybe once before that in my life, and it was a club at like Dixie and Dundas called Astrolite. It burned down in like 90 or 91 or something. So that's as furthest as I've ever gone to Mississauga. Never passed that place in my life, right? And I wanted to go surprise her at work one day because, again, she was being like hard to get and rah rah ray.
I remember.
So I drove to Square One, and it felt like I was going to the end of the world. It was so far. And I got there, and I couldn't remember the store she told me she worked at. I know she worked in a clothing store. It ended up being Fairweather. But I walked the entire mall trying to find this store. And when I found her, she gave me like, yo, you're a stalker kind of vibes. And I was like, no, I just wanted to, yeah, maybe I was, but I just wanted to find you and see you again and blah, blah, blah. Yo, she played games if that was May when we met, she probably played games for well over a month, acted like she didn't like me. She didn't want nothing to do. Oh, yeah, didn't want nothing to do with me.
I feel like that's always been her stance. It's kind of like, do you really like him or do you not like him? But then you were always there.
Right.
You guys were always together.
So interestingly, when I kind of found out that she did, like she kept telling herself she didn't really like me or she wasn't into me. And when I don't remember how I found out. I think I read something, like I read a note somewhere that she writes herself. She had a diary or something, and somehow she either left it in my car or something happened. And I absolutely, man. I was like, yo, I need to find out if this is real or not. When I found out she was saying stuff like, I don't really know why he comes around, blah, blah, blah. I was like, oh wow, okay, fuck this. I'm not wasting any more time. And I literally cut her off. I stopped talking to her. I stopped
Oh,
taking her calls. And she had one of her best friends was this girl named Sophie. And Sophie called me, I think, and told me, yo, this girl's miserable that you're not talking to her. And I'm like, well, why is she telling herself she don't like me or she don't want nothing to do with me? And then when I'm not there, it's you're
she
miserable. Make up your mind, right? Like stop playing games. Like if this is,
right.
and again, remember, we're teenagers,
Exactly.
right?
That's
This
why
is
she
not
can
no,
make up her
right.
mind.
And well, not even that, but it's like in hindsight, when you're an adult looking back, you're like, it makes sense that she didn't, who's settling down at 17 or 18 or whatever she was. Like I'm a year older than her. So I think she was gonna turn 17 or 18 that year.
Right.
And I had just turned 19. So we're like 1 year and a bit apart or whatever it is, right?
Right. Yes.
Um, and so anyway, make a long story short, she apologized and acknowledged that she does like me and rah rah ray. And then, we went through all this teenager bullshit for the better, until
Wow.
until we got old enough and matured and we had kids young. Like she was 22 or something and I was 23 when we had our first
Yeah.
son, right?
Oh,
So
sure.
but it's been a long time. So yeah, so May 91 is when we first started talking. So
That was crazy. And that's
it's been a
why I
long
know
time.
you.
And the fact that you even know half of that shit is crazy to me.
I
Like,
well, this is how long I've known you. I've known you for like 30 years.
yeah,
And
for sure.
but you've become like mastermind. And not that I'm not, hey, my truth, I'm not trying to downplay what I've been doing in my life, but it's kind of like you've always been kind of edging away at your career. And it was just
Right.
really nice to be like, I know that guy. I remember when he liked my girlfriend and I didn't know she liked him. And then it was like, I bumped into him to her years later. And I'm like, are you still with Paul? She's like, yup. I was like, no way.
Right. But the thing is, our circle has always been very, very tight, right? Because the same people that, like, because you were in a relationship with somebody who was close friends with people that I, would
Yeah,
associate with, and we obviously have gone on business trips together. We've been in the same places,
right.
at
Always
different
coming up.
functions, and because I think not only Jamaica, but I think we were also in Miami together and other places. So
We've gone so many places just because of the
yeah,
music industry. And not that I was a
right,
part of the music industry. I was just one of those people that wanted to be a part of birthing music in Canada. I was
yeah,
a
for
big
sure.
Canadian music fan. I would hear this music and be like, why aren't we hearing this on the radio? Why can't I listen to Cardinal? Like, this song is dope. Why am I?
Yeah,
It would frustrate me. So I was a big part of like people who would push for the radio station and support the community radio, which is what you've gone back to now, which we'll get to.
right,
But
right.
it was a big. We helped build the community of music in Canada,
We
and
definitely were a part of it for sure. There was a lot of people that were involved in all of it, but yeah, we were definitely there on the ground floor for
yeah,
sure.
I think it's really dope to be able to be, definitely me on the periphery, but to watch you do your thing and become like, even when you got onto the radio, I remember, you and Russell Peters, and I would go to California Dream, I would go to different places, and like, it's
Right,
just so odd to have been a part of seeing people at that level and then seeing how well you all have done in this industry is really, really cool.
right.
And it was nice to see the come up. So that was dope. And I just want to shout out to Tanya at Bay Knot Creations because I see that she's doing some really cool stuff.
Oh
And
yeah, it's her and my daughter. Well, our daughter. They
yes,
have their little. I don't even know what to call, but they do gift baskets and
it's dope.
confections and party favors and treats and stuff. And yeah, they got a nice little thing going on, and
They
and, and
do.
good for them. I'm really proud of them, and I've helped them and guided them with some of the early entrepreneur stuff that I was doing with mixtapes and DJing and all that. I've given them advice and kind of
Yes.
explained how I did things, and they've utilized that and kind of ran with it with the stuff that they're doing with Baynon Creations, which is very cool.
Yes, very cool. Okay, people are tabbing in. Hola to you, Oliver. Big up yourself, Francine. Love the love story intro. So that's really nice. But I've been dying to ask you this question all these years, which is, how did you get the name Mastermind? And how is Mastermind different from Paul?
Oh, wow. Okay, so first off, so Mastermind happened because of a legendary DJ in the city called named Ron Nelson. He had probably the first hip hop show in the entire country,
Right.
and that's kind of in part how I was introduced to hip hop, but also radio, I guess. And I was a huge fan. Like try to make a long story short, I discovered breakdancing one weekend when I was probably like 12 outside Eaton Center.
Yeah.
Down there, you come outside, me and my friend are down there, and there's a giant crowd, and we're like, what's this? And we climbed on top of one of those, electric boxes because we're so short we couldn't see. And we saw these kids breakdancing with the cardboard and the boom box. And I was immediately like enamored with it. I was like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen.
I know, right?
And I spent the next who knows how long trying to find more of this. And in the neighborhood that I lived, there wasn't a lot of it. So it was hard to find. Like, even though I had some older cousins and they kind of, did their thing with breakdancing and had friends, get mixtapes from the States and bring it to them and they would share. It wasn't this, like, I didn't quite discover this yet. And one, fateful day, I happened to bump into somebody at the park near my house, and they had a boombox and they were playing very similar to the music that I heard when I witnessed the breakdancing. And I was like, yo, where'd you hear that? And I'm a kid, a young guy, right? So where did you hear this? Like, where can I hear this? And they told me about this radio station, 88.1 CKLN, and it's on Saturday afternoons, 1 to 4, and that's where you can hear this stuff.
Crazy.
So the next Saturday, I was outside on my deck because back in 80, this was probably 85 or 80, probably 85.
87 for sure.
No, it was 85 because I got my show in 87. So just either 84, 85. And their signal at the time was probably only like 50 watts or something. So I'm in the backyard. There's a coat hanger on the box on the antenna. And I'm just trying to find this thing. And I found it. And it was March or something. So it was freezing. And so I'm out there listening to this show. And somehow I figured out a way to get a better signal inside. And from that point, Saturdays 1 to 4, this is all I did. I went and bought cassettes. And my parents knew that I'm not doing anything on a Saturday from 1 to 4. We're not going to the Sears outlet. We're not going to the supermarket. I'm not doing nothing with y'all. I'm listening to this radio show and recording it and whatnot. So I get enamored and infatuated with this radio show. The host of this show is Ron Nelson. Just completely fall in love with the music, the culture, everything about it. And probably listen, for the better part of 6 months to a year, and drew up the courage, maybe not even that long, but enough courage to one day go down. Actually, I know it was 85. You know why? Because I won tickets off Ron to go to my very first concert, which ironically was LL Cool J at Concert Hall. And I called in, and I don't remember what it was. I probably had to answer a trivia question. And I was very, very nerdy about the music. And, I would buy records and I would read the labels and I would find out the artist's real name and where they recorded it, the record label,
Wow.
anything that I could find in the credits or on the label itself. I was just drilling that into my head. And that was above and beyond the actual song component, like learning the song and memorizing the lyrics. And so I was very, very nerdy about that stuff. And so I'm trying to make the story short, but it's so long. So
this is how you got Mastermind.
Right, we're getting there. So eventually so the first time I went down there to pick my tickets up was the first time I met him. And I was super shy, like, it's meeting your idol or whatever. It's
Wow.
like, you're quiet. You're like, hey, how you doing? You grab the thing and you leave. And then there was another time where I worked up enough courage to come down there again, and I brought record for him to autograph or something.
Wow.
And Ron signed it and whatnot. And at that point, I kind of told him how big of a fan I was, and how I wanted to be a rapper or something. And interestingly enough, I somehow endeared myself to this guy to the point where he had a street team where he had a bunch of kids who he would use to help promote, because he was a concert promoter on top of
Yes.
being a radio host. So he DJ'd, he played clubs, and he was a concert promoter. Big concerts, like super ahead of his time in terms of the vision for what he wanted to do for the music in this city and whatnot. And so his street team were kids in the same age as me, which was probably 13 or 14, maybe not even that old, probably 13. And he would pick them up at nighttime, and it would be two teams of two, and we would drive up and down the major streets. So let's use Finch, for example. We would start in the east end of Finch, and he would drop two guys off at one intersection, and we would poster that intersection. So we would, run to each corner, put the posters up. One guy would hold the poster, the other guy would do the tape, and we'd knock that intersection out while he dropped people at the next intersection, the other two guys.
Right.
Then he would come back and get us. We would go to the next past intersection. He'd come back and get to the other two guys. And we literally would do that from McCowan all the way to Kipling or whatever.
Crazy.
And we would do that in the nighttime because obviously it's illegal to do all that. and he had this crazy system. And what you would get was you'd get tickets to go to these events, these concerts, and his parties. And he would feed you at the end of the night, right? So we'd all go to Mr. Sub at the end of the night, and we'd have subs, and he'd feed you. And you felt so old because, I don't even know how I was allowed to do this at that age. But I'd be coming home at like 2 a.m, and I don't know how either I pulled the wool over my parents' eyes or they didn't love me or something. But
I know. We were out there in these streets.
I'll never forget the first time, and it was with Ron. I came home when the sun came up. I was like, what is going on right now? I felt like such a big man. So anyhow, so we became friends, and I was still like, when I say friends, it wasn't really like, it's not like this man is friends with these young kids. He was like a mentor, and he's like a superhero to you if you're into all of this stuff, right? Like he's the biggest DJ. He's playing the music. He's got the concerts. He's on the radio, blah, 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 right? So at some point I showed an interest in what he was doing and doing like little tape mixes and weird stuff. But while we would do this, I'm jumping around, but while we would do the postering, while we were driving with everybody, he would ask like trivia in the car and stuff. And I would always, because I was such a nerd, I'd be killing it, answering these questions, playing Name That Tune and, knowing what that song were, the artist was or whatever. And one point I called into the show or something, and he did that on the air.
Oh, crazy.
And I killed it. Like I just nailed it, answered every question. And at the end of that, he said, you know what? You're a mastermind. I'm going to call you Mastermind. The interesting part is Ron had an alias. He actually named himself Mastermind because he wanted to branch out in terms of his DJing. So he was known as a hip hop DJ, but he wanted to start playing in like house and techno clubs, but he couldn't play as Ron Nelson because the name didn't correlate with that genre of music. Right. So he created this alter ego, Mastermind, and that's what he would DJ under. So when he first initially named me, he called me Mastermind 2.
Oh,
but when I got my own radio show at CHRY, my program director at the time said, you should ask Ron if he's still going to use the name because, you can't call yourself Mastermind 2. It doesn't sound right. So I had a conversation with Ron. I was like, hey, is it okay if I use the name? And he's like, yeah, no problem. Blah, blah. I don't really use it. And that's where the name came from.
Wow.
So the difference between Paul and Mastermind, I don't know if there really is a difference. They're kind of, Mastermind is just a nickname for the DJ. You know what I mean? Because just like rappers or anybody, anybody in that entertainment genre, if you will, it's just an alias or whatever. I mean, nowadays it's interesting how, I mean, I'm trying to think of who might the first person have been. Maybe it was Eric Sermon who decided to start using their real name,
Right.
or Keith, or even Keith Murray. Actually, he might have been one of the first ones.
Yeah.
Ones. But now it's very common where guys just call themselves whatever their name is, right? Jack Harlow,
Not really Curtis Blow.
Drake, but back when we came up, there was an alias. You weren't
always had it. But that was also very hip hop to have an alias too.
Right. So whether you were a DJ, whether you were a DJ, even breakdancing or graffiti artists, they never used their real names. Everybody had an alias, right? So anyway, yeah, it's hard for me to give you an answer with regards to what the difference between the two. They're so intertwined with everything, whether it's radio or DJing or even when I was making albums or whatever, like they're just it's one and the same, right?
You're mentioning all of these things, but it's like these are big deals. And I remember you talking to an artist who had sold out the Phoenix. I can't remember his name right now, but he had never performed before. A friend, I think his name is just with an A.
Anders.
Yeah. So you were talking to him in an interview saying that, this guy, hold on, you stopped him and you're like, wait a second, you've never performed before and you sold out the Phoenix. And it's like, you're here talking about all of your achievements and it's like, hold on a second. People need to understand, even maybe you need to understand that, look what you've done.
Right.
Look at what you've done with your career. Like, I'm trying to chart it, but I realize that an hour is definitely not long enough to chart the success of your 30-year career. But I'm going to definitely try to, because a part of this podcast is to really inspire people who may want to be a DJ, want to get in production. How does a DJ get a record deal?
Well, I mean, it depends. If you're talking about this particular DJ.
Yes, this particular DJ.
I didn't go source that. That kind of fell in my lap, right? So, radio was obviously my first love. I went to school for radio. I went to Seneca College and took broadcasting and radio and television. Right. And it was something I always, whenever it was that I fell in love with it, that's what I enjoyed. I actually did radio before I knew how to DJ. Like, I just wanted to talk on the radio. And when it became necessary for me to start spinning my own music, that's when I learned actually how to mix and cut and scratch and all that stuff. And so that was after. And so the two are always obviously very tightly intertwined. But when I transitioned from college radio to commercial radio, which was in '94, I had already at that point was making mixtapes for people, but not a lot of people. It was like my buddies, for Tanya, myself. But when I got to the Energy Radio days, or Energy 108, when I first got there was a store downtown, a clothing store called Two Black Guys. Yes. And I would make tape for people once in a while. And they said, I remember at one point I made tapes for them, and they would say, people come here and want to take the tapes, because I would make once a month or once a week or whatever, right? Because I was also, because of my radio background, I was getting records way before they were even getting to the stores, right? Because the labels all knew me in New York and whatnot, so they were sending me stuff the way they would any radio station or radio personality in the U.S.
Right.
And so my tapes are kind of way ahead of the musical curve.
Dope.
And these guys would be like, I can't tell you how many times people have tried to take the tapes or asked us to dub them. I said, you could sell these. And I never really thought about it. Pardon me. But they were like, tell you what, make dub 10. We'll sell them here on consignment. All we want is you just keep giving us tapes to play.
Yeah.
And we'll sell these tapes for you, $10 a pop. And I guarantee you they're going to sell.
Right.
I think the first 10 I dropped off sold in like 2 hours. And they called me back and they were like, they're all gone. I was like, what? And they said, yeah, man, drop more. So Two Black Guys is where the whole mixtape thing started. And it got really big there. But then a light bulb went off and I was like, okay, well, where else can I sell these? You could sell them in barbershops. You could sell them in other clothing stores. Wow. And you can definitely sell them at the two big DJ, record shops.
Yeah. Are you okay?
Yeah, that's never happened before. The two big record shops. And so it really expanded from there. And the record deal happened because, and I did that actually from 94 until 99. And the reason we stopped is because there was like a mixtape crackdown.
Right.
It happened in the US earlier, and then it finally happened
Oh, I
in
remember.
Canada.
That's in a documentary. I've seen that.
Right. Yeah. So in 99, they went and raided all the record stores,
Yes.
confiscated all the tapes, and gave out tickets to these stores. And it was such a super hypocritical and contradictory thing to happen, because these same record labels that supply the DJs with the music to make these tapes, and who encouraged the DJs to play their music on our tapes,
Right.
were the same people that they came after. So you had two sides of a company. You had this marketing and promotions company that's saying, hey, DJs, make sure you're playing our shit on your tapes and on your shows, and blah, blah, blah. And then you had the legal and more presidential side of the company saying, hey, we're losing all this money to these mixtapes, which was bullshit. But we're losing all this money, so we need to shut it down. The real reason was that some of the DJs decided to start making CDs.
Oh.
It's one thing to make mixtapes that, deteriorate, they're not competing quality. But when you started making CDs, like real CD quality, and the CDs became so popular that people were going into like HMVs and, Sam the Music Man and shit like that, asking for these things. And then what happens is the record store people hit the labels up and say, hey, who's this XYZ DJ? We need that. And then now it becomes a conflict of interest, because you have the licensed DJs, the MC Marios and the Chris Shepherds and the Much Music, Party Mix XYZ, that are legit licensing this music, that now they're losing money because of the CDs, right? That's why the whole crackdown happened. Now, when that happened in 99, there was a somewhat robust kind of urban black music divisions in all the record labels. And one of those departments was at Virgin EMI, spearheaded by Craig Mannix, aka Big C, and a team of people there. And they had the idea of, okay, let's find the two biggest, people doing tapes and make it legit. Right. And so they came after me, and they came after Baby Blue, and said, we want to sign you guys to the record label, and Mastermind will put out our hip hop mixes, and Blue, you'll put out our more crossover R&B, pop stuff.
I never knew that backstory. That's crazy.
Right. And so we were both supposed to sign to Virgin EMI, and what happened was Universal Records got wind of this and upped the ante and offered Blue a better deal, I guess, or a better opportunity. And Blue then said, no, we're not going to sign with Virgin. We're going to Universal, which obviously pissed off Virgin, because it's kind of like stabbing him in the back or whatever. Sure. And then, so we had the two separate things. So to answer your question, how does a DJ like me get a record deal? It came to me. I didn't pursue it. It's still on the radio while I was doing tapes. That's all I cared about. When they came to me, my idea, my thought of it was, okay, you're going to cut me this huge check. You're not going to, it's going to help my career, obviously. Yeah. And it was something that I enjoyed to do, but as long as it didn't cause me grief or anything like that, then I'm down. You know what I mean? Like I was down to however we could push the music and the culture and whatever these guys wanted to do. And that's basically, how that happened.
Yeah, that's dope. You a quote that you said once was, do what you love and love what you do. And I think that's how you get a record label, a record deal.
Yeah. And I tell that to everybody, anybody who asks me, about work-life balance and all that. It's like, that is a quote that I live by. I stand by it. It's like, if you're doing something that you truly enjoy, or how do I say it? When I would tell my kids, I'd be like, if you would do it for free and you figure out a way to get paid for it, it's never going to be work. It'll never feel like work. It'll never be work. It's just what you do. and you make money from it. You know what I mean? And I've been fortunate enough to be able to do this for the better part of 30 years, more than 30 years. It's probably coming up to 35 years now, where I've been on the radio, and I've somehow managed to make a career out of it and earn a living and enjoy, for the most part, I would say the majority of those 35 years have been enjoyable. There's been a few here and there that because of certain work situations that were not the most enjoyable, but you take it in stride, and you kind of keep it moving and try to get back into the happy place. And right now I'm in a very happy place.
That's dope. Okay, Francine wants to know. She's a big fan.
Hey, Francine. Hello.
She says, "What's your take on the urban radio stations in Toronto right now? Why does it still seem so limited in terms of what gets played on rotation?" Great question.
On rotation. Okay, that's an interesting thing. Radio is a medium of repetition, right? So when you listen to like top 40 radio, for example, the most successful stations, and this is not just hyperbole, this is like every market, the biggest radio stations in those markets are the ones that play the hits over and over and over. And it's funny, like, consultants and program directors will always tell you, if I don't get complaints that I'm playing the same record over and over, I'm not doing something right. When people are saying, y'all are playing the same I'm hearing the same record too much, that's when you know you're a hit music station and your numbers are going to be amazing. So you also have to remember that there's only so many slots in an hour, and then in turn in 24-hour period where you can play records, and you have to build clocks and rotations, and you have to fill those. And so you can't, if you just played, I've heard radio stations, there's been radio stations that had no structure. And when I mean structure, I'm talking about categories of music, playing the hottest records and playing the next hottest records, and then playing some classic records and playing new records. Right. If you didn't put a limitation on how many songs were in those categories, you wouldn't hear those records enough. So a song would play, let's say, what's today? Today's Monday at 5. A song would play Monday at 5, and then you don't hear it again until Friday at 2 in the afternoon. That's not going to help you build that song, create an ongoing balance in a playlist. Like when you're listening to streaming and they keep changing records a lot of people don't know the behind the scenes on how streaming works, and how there's a lot of paid to get on playlist stuff. Like payola, as much as people want to say it exists, maybe in the States it does, payola doesn't exist in Canada. You can't pay anybody unless you want to go to jail, meaning the person who accepts the money for playing people's records. And so I understand that there's a bunch of people out there that want to be on the cutting edge of music and just constantly be hearing new music and not hearing the same thing, over and over. But when there are hit records, you got to remember the way radio works for the most part. When I mean the most part, yes, there's people that get to the office, they turn on their favorite station, and they listen to it for the 8 hours that they're at the office.
Yes.
Those people exist. But then there's the people, and the majority of the people are the ones that they don't turn the radio on until they get in the car for their commute. Their commute is like an hour or even less. Mom gets in the car to drive the kids to school or whatever, they go grab groceries, and they're in the car for like 11 minutes.
Yes.
And when they're in the car for the 11 minutes, they want to hear their favorite record at the moment. When they turn the radio on, it better be whatever that hottest record is at that moment.
Right.
And and that's what radio is. Radio is, it's not for the people who only want to consume music through streaming or the newest music. It's the people who want to hear familiar music, right? Because radio is typically background stuff.
Yeah.
Right. It sits in the background. It's there. Kids are in the back. We're talking about what we're doing, or you're driving with somebody. When you're in the car by yourself on your commute and you're stuck in traffic, yes, radio gets turned up and you're paying more attention. But for the most part, and I'm generalizing, but for the most part,
it makes total sense. It makes total sense. I'm just thinking about how interesting Toronto was in not having an urban radio station for so long, and how much the community and the college and university stations helped to kind of formulate an industry within Canada for our hip hop and R&B scene. And I think it's because there'd be all of these specialized shows that gave us a little bit more variety. I would remember like the CKLNs and the CHRYs were definitely giving me more variety than, say, you know.
But also remember, you were listening for a 3-hour period of a show that was only on once a week.
Yeah.
Right. And if you did listen during those 3 hours, the DJs were always still trying to play the biggest records at the time. And so the week before, you'd still hear those same records. Maybe they would be mixed differently or played at a different time, but you were still hearing, you know, when Live at the Barbecue was the biggest record, every Saturday you're going to hear Live at the Barbecue until that record's not the biggest record anymore, right? Like, you know, that's how it is. Now, again, when there's a 24-hour radio station playing this music, you have to continuously rotate the same songs. And that's where the gold records come in. The classic records are the ones that are your spice categories and stuff. But if I'm not playing, like, what's one of the hottest records right now? Last by Burna Boy. If we're not playing that record, you know, every 2.5 or 2 hours, you're not playing the right record. You're playing the hottest record. Imagine going to an event, a party, and you're there for 5 hours, and the man them don't play last. You went the whole night and you didn't hear it. It's the hottest record. You'd be like, yo, guy, how come you didn't play blah, blah, blah? Now, it'd be different if they played it 8 times a night, right? And you're only there for 5 hours. Okay, cool. That's a different story. However, I will tell you, in the States, like, in Toronto, DJs are an interesting breed. We don't like repeating records.
Yeah.
So if there was an opener, meaning not the headline DJ or the main time DJ, they would have to know not to play the joints, because the joints were saved for prime time, you know, and I don't know what prime time is nowadays, but let's just say 11:30 to 1:30 would be prime time or whatever, right?
Yes.
I'm sure it's a bit later now, but if a DJ played a record before you got on, you would never play that record. You might as well just take it and put it in the back of your crate and be like, yeah, I'm not playing that.
Right.
American DJs would come here and repeat records. And the philosophy was, if I'm starting the night at 9 o'clock, the people that are in the club at 9 o'clock deserve to hear the biggest joints.
Sure.
And and the people that show up at midnight also deserve to hear the biggest joints.
Right.
So why would I play a record at 9:30 or 10 o'clock and then not play it again at 12:30? Again, these are American DJs, right? Because I've had this conversation now, and a lot of these Canadian DJs still refuse to repeat records. And there's other DJs who've now adopted the whole, no, I can play a record again. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So just like, I understand Francine's point of view that sometimes repetitiveness can be annoying, but you got to remember, we live in a city, and I can even say country, but let's just focus on Toronto. We live in a city where there's arguably 6 top 40 stations, and there was only 2 commercial black stations and 1 community black station, right? Music station.
Yes.
Now there's only 1 commercial black music station and 1 community black music station. And let's just keep it real. All 3 of those radio stations had some of the weakest signals that the CRTC could ever give out, right? Like, they're not giving us 10,000 watts so that Flow can be heard the same way, you know, Chum FM can be heard or whatever. We've always had to deal with signal issues with Flow or with G, and most definitely with Vibe, with Vibe 105, right? So
the name above your head. Oh no, where did you go? He was getting to the good stuff. You know what? This is a good time to break, because I want to give a big shout out to my Bukan sponsor. It's this amazing Haitian restaurant in the city of Toronto in the North Beaches.
All right.
Can we run that commercial for me, please? Could you do that?
So my name is Amir. I'm one of the owners of Bukan, also one of the chefs at Bukan. When I think about Bukan, it's more of a personal spiritual thing. So Bukan is it's fire. What comes to my mind was fire, the energy that comes with it.
Hey, big up to Bukan. You got to go eat there. It's amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's really great. So speaking of food, I heard another quote. We're going to transition away from the community radio station versus, because I want to go back into it a little bit, but it's going to, like, I'll never learn anything about you. I want to know why you said mans can cook, mans can build shit. That was what quote that you said.
Right. Yeah, because there's a lot of dudes, like I found out that there's dudes that can't do that, right? And I couldn't always cook. Like I think I learned out of necessity. When we moved away from Toronto, it was just me, Tanya, and the kids, and we didn't have any family, no one to rely on. And at that point, now you can open the door, guy. Go ahead. At that point, at that I had to at least learn. But I also, ended up we moved into a house which was an open concept, and so my kitchen had a direct view of the big screen TV in the family room or the living room.
Yes.
And I used to watch Food Network all day. And watching that, you have to learn how to do everything, right?
Yes.
Right. And so and it also became super important because we were spending so much money on takeout or restaurants or whatever, and it was like, what are we doing? Let's learn how to do this stuff. And so I learned, and I always, in terms of the build thing, I took industrial arts in grade 9, so I was building bookshelves and stuff in IA, like using band saws and drills and all. Like I did stuff around the house. I was doing electrical as a teenager and stuff. And so when we bought our first house, I think one of the first assignments that got put on my honey-do list was I had to put a lantern. Tanya wanted a street lamp on our driveway, and I had to wire it and put it through the concrete, obviously insulating and putting up drywall in the garage, wiring the basement so that we could have electricity in the basement and all that stuff. So I learned all that stuff, and I've constantly like, don't get me wrong, like I'm not good enough to have an HGTV show, but I'm good enough to build shit. Yeah, well, you never know. But I'm definitely good enough. I'm good enough where I can, build decks and build a shed and wire my house and, do the things I need to do.
That's amazing. Okay, I'm trying to barter what it is that I'm going to ask you because there's only a little bit of time left.
Yeah.
I heard that you were instrumental in having Common do a track with Socrates. Is that true?
Oh, well, I wouldn't say. So what happened was, Sox, and we all are close friends and stuff. So I worked with Sox's manager, and they would tell me what the vision was, and because I was so connected in the U.S. with record labels and managers and artists and all that type of stuff, they sent me on a fishing expedition, if you will, to the States to try to see, because they were working on Sox's album, and we wanted to do collaborations. Now, if you think about anybody that's come out of the States, cosigns are an enormous part of kind of getting that credibility. Wow. But no one was really doing like getting big collabs of current artists on a multiple scale. It'd be like one record here or there. It wasn't like a big thing. And our vision was, we want to get multiple collabs on one project or whatever. And so we wrote a list of the people that we'd like to collab with and whatnot. And I went to New York, and I went to go find the people that, through my connections, who we could get linked up. So, I was, when you think about Sox's, I think it was his Brick House EP. That's the one that had the main collabs, right? So I was in Master Ace's living room pitching him Sox. I went to D&D Studios to pitch Primo on Sox and try to get some collabs through his his connections. I went to the studio where Mad Skills was, but he wanted way too much money, so that one never happened. I linked up with Common's manager and pitched the idea to them. They were down. I forget how the OC collab came, but it was very similar to any of these people. Like I linked up with them through my connections, pitched the concept, pitched the idea. How much do you want? And then we basically went back and looked at the budget and broke it all down and made that happen, right? So that entire Brick House EP comp with all the Helter Skelters on there too, I think.
Yes, you're bringing me back for real.
Yeah, and so all those link ups were basically through my connections. Now him teaming up with Redman, that was something on their own, right? Like Socks was that guy who you knew was special and super talented, and something was going to happen with him regardless. But sometimes you got to just plant the seed or give an assist or whatever, and I assisted in helping make that project come together.
Okay, there's three main things that I want to get before you go, and one of them is I'll tell you what they are. Made in Toronto.
Okay.
Your switch back to Vibe.
Yeah.
And, let's go with those two right now, because then I can see if the other one's even relevant.
Sure. The Made in Toronto takeover was something we created when I was at Flow, and it was, I noticed in 2016 that there was this amazing shift happening in this city that I'd never seen before. Toronto has always been known as the screwface capital. Why is that? Because we would hate our own. We would never support them on a grand scale. You know what I mean? And it was never, it wasn't like you could go to a party and throw a Canadian artist record on and it would blow the place up. It was not like, the kids nowadays, all they know is Drake and The Weeknd and how big these stars are.
Yeah.
Like we weren't in those days. Like we were in this real self-hate kind of vibe. Even though we had tremendous talent and stuff, it was never to the way it is now. But in 2016, I kind of noticed like these kids are starting to sing these rappers songs. These guys aren't even on the radio anywhere. Like, how are they finding this stuff? And this is when streaming just started happening. And obviously, kids in high school, like they're way ahead of everybody else. And they, they would learn songs and music and however they were discovering it. But I noticed that something was happening, and I said, we got to figure out a way how to tap into this for our benefit, but also for the benefit of these artists. And it started with a one-day, all-day celebration of just playing artists from Toronto, and we did it on Toronto's birthday, which is March 6th.
Okay.
And we came up with this concept. We're going to play nothing but Toronto artists from 6 a.m. until midnight, something that's never been done in the history of radio anywhere.
Right.
And came up with the name of we brainstormed this name. It came to me in my dream somewhere, like the Made in Toronto takeover. That's the one. And we created this thing. And then the idea was that after the all day one, we would turn it into a nightly program. It took a minute to actually convince the powers that be, because again, when you're dealing with companies that don't come from the culture, or they don't think about the community aspect, all they think about is dollars and cents and if it's going to make money. And so that part of it, was a bit of a challenge, but we eventually got it to be 5 days a week. And we did at least 2 of those all day versions.
Right.
And then the last one, they canceled on us because they felt that it wasn't good enough for the ratings. And so again, it goes back to the whole, they don't care about the community, they don't care about the bridge building. They just care about dollars and cents. And thankfully, Ricochet, who hosted that program for the majority of its time, was smart enough to retain the name and the ownership of that program. And so when I brought him over to Vibe 105, where I am now, we were fortunate enough to bring that show with us. So the show lives on. It's now on at Vibe 6 days a week. It's on Sunday through Thursday. Sunday through Friday. Yeah, it's on 6 days a week.
Okay.
And it's a place to help emerging artists, in the sense that there's a lot of talent that isn't quite to the point where it can get into regular rotation, but it's good enough to be heard. And there's they deserve to be have some place to be showcased. Yeah. And we moved it. They buried it at 11 p.m. late at night. because it's like, oh, it's an all Canadian show and we'll just put it late at night. It's bad for ratings, blah, blah, blah. We said we're not going to do that here at Vibe. We're going to put it on at 6 p.m. in a time slot where anybody can hear it.
Yes.
People can get excited about hearing themselves for the first time on the radio. And to kind of go back to the whole Vibe 105 thing, I started my career at CHRY in '87. It was the first place I got on the radio, my own radio show. And then, earlier in the middle of last year, I was approached by Randy Reed, who's the general manager and CEO of what is now transitioned to Vibe 105, and encouraged me to come in and talk about potentially coming in as the content manager and program director. And we had some conversations and we shared visions and ideas, and here I am, and super happy and glad to be in a place that embraces the culture, supports the culture, wants the culture to nourish and get big and be celebrated, and we don't have to deal with culture vultures, for lack of a better
That's
term.
what it is. Call it thing.
Yeah, and people who genuinely think beyond just the dollars and cents, and
Mike says he wants to get it says, I want to get an Afro show on Vibe. You do Afro on Vibe?
We'll talk about that. I mean, listen. Where Vibe 105 is number one for hip hop, R&B, and the culture encompasses, reggae and dancehall, soca, and Afrobeat. Right?
Sweet.
It's not a buried component of the genre on art. Like, we celebrate that every hour. Like, every hour you're hearing all those genres: soca,
Amazing.
Afrobeat, dancehall, reggae. It's not one of those things where we're saying, hey, we're going to do a specialty show on a Sunday night or anything like that.
Wow.
No, this is 24 hours a day, and these songs are. Again, going back to what Francine was talking about, these songs are in rotation. You're hearing the biggest records all like every 2 hours, just like
any commercial station.
But I'm saying, like, any international hit that's out right now, whatever, Jack Harlow record or Drake record is a number one record. You're also hearing Burna Boy or Spice or Shensia or WizKid or whoever, like, in the same amount of rotation.
Yeah,
we're very proud of it. I'm actually very proud of how the radio station sounds. I hope people enjoy it.
Yeah.
And appreciate it, because, again, flow was appreciated, but it was also underappreciated, and you don't really know what you have until it's gone. And I don't really care so much about it being gone from the way that those people ran it versus just what it represented for the culture, right? And had they let that station be run the same way a Vibe is being run, I think it would have been a whole different conversation and whatnot. But it is what it is.
So that segues into what it is that I wanted to ask as the last question, which was, are there women participating? I feel like it's always been very male dominated in the hip hop and R&B radio industry. Yes, there's Gem. I think there's Red. But, I'm talking about, like, in the streets, like how the men are able to get positions into record labels and transition that way.
I think so. I mean, I'm not heavily on the record label side, but I know that there's a bunch of women in there, and I support as many as I can. I try to give opportunities to as many women as I can. I hired Ace West, Alicia, when I was at Flow, much to the chagrin of my bosses, because she was very green at radio. She wasn't like, we're putting her on in the biggest market in the country. But my argument to them was, you can teach someone to be a good radio person. You can't teach them authenticity, and you can't teach them culture. And she had culture. She comes from the culture. She had authenticity. And I said, if you spend the time with her, you'll get her to be what you want her to be. And that's how I tried to approach it. And again, that's with anybody who I try to mentor or develop in terms of being a programmer.
I love it. So what's next? What are you still thirsty as F for?
I don't know, a bigger paycheck maybe, but other than that, no, I'm really happy. Like, again, when I transitioned here to Vibe, it wasn't for the money. I'm not nearly making even remotely close to what I was making at my previous jobs. But my dad, interestingly enough, my dad dropped a gem on me, and he said, you can't put a price tag on not having to deal with bullshit. And I dealt with a lot of bullshit at a lot of those companies that I worked for, and I'm not dealing with it here. So it's almost like, that money that I'm not getting is being spent on peace of mind and happiness. So that's where we are.
Thank you so much for spending the time with us. Thank you for watching the Cocktale Hour, everyone. Big up to Business Takeout, who inspires Black wealth and Black entrepreneurship. And if you'd like to advertise or sponsor on the show, hit us up. I'm your host, L.A. Wade, and this is the legendary Mastermind.
Thank you for having me.
So much. Big up yourself. Peace, everybody. See you next week.
If you enjoy our programming and want to help support Black entrepreneurship, please donate today. www.businesstakeout.com/donate.